But we should cut spending. We could and should. Now, I've always argued the case that you don't go and cut some social programs where people have been taught to be dependent for several generations now. So, under these circumstances, every once in a while we have these proposals in Washington. Conservatives don't want to cut any of the military spending, and they'll say, oh, we have to be fiscal conservatives, so they want to cut child health care, you know, a few $1 million. And I said, that just doesn't add up because it's not going to work that way. But you could cut overseas spending. There's no reason why every single program that we spend money here at home, if we don't want to just cut it off, like what's going to happen if we continue with runaway inflation, everything just gets cut off. So if we cut back, put some toward the deficit tied to people, but we could work our way out of it. What are the odds of that happening? Very, very slim. It's not likely to happen because it makes too much sense. So they're not going to do that. They're going to, unfortunately, deliver to you a much bigger problem. And I see that the only thing that's holding us together right now is the dollar. Believe it or not, the dollar standard that created this in a financial system, that's collapsed because it was debt on debt. But people still now are buying dollars. I believe part of that comes from the fact that central banks get together and decide it's in the interest of everybody to try and prop the dollar up for as long as possible. Even the Chinese. They didn't buy many dollars in January and February, but they bought a lot of dollars in March. So they're still buying dollars. But the dollar is the last resistance to total economic collapse and a crisis here. It's the foundation, and it's not a sound foundation. It's a foundation of sand. And once that's discovered, the dollar is going to lose its value because we have been creating more than anything this world has ever seen. And then we will have a major crisis. They talk about the problems that we face today economically, but what will happen when the dollar doesn't work, people are going to get angry, and they're going to get upset. And that, to me, worries me. And that is why the message of liberty, the message of limited government, the message of sound money, the message of limited taxation is so vital because the answers are there. We don't have to suffer through this. But right now, that's all that you're being offered. And you'd think they would be cutting back overseas, but there they go, expanding the DOD budget. But what about the expansion of the war? Do you think for a minute that they're going to be out of Iraq next year? The war is going to continue because of the same people running it. They're not going to walk away. There's as much instability there as ever. Probably a lot more instability than there was before we went in. And just think of the millions of people that have died and suffered, on both sides, and how many of our families and our military have suffered. And yet, here we are. We have our presence in Iraq. We have our presence in Afghanistan. Almost on a daily basis, we're dropping bombs on Pakistan. And even Obama in the campaign promised he was going to send more troops to Afghanistan. And he's doing that. You know, we had a vote not too long ago. It was on AmeriCorps. And AmeriCorps is that program that's going to discipline all our young people. So if you don't have a job, they're likely to invite you into AmeriCorps. But unfortunately, the goals of many in the administration is to make it mandatory national youth service, and that to me is not part of what I think America is all about. They come at the understanding of rights a lot differently than we do because they believe it comes from the government. And they believe very sincerely that a draft is permissible under our system. You know what I call a draft? I call it slavery, and that was supposed to have been outlawed. We were hoping for some changes. Maybe there'd be some modification in the drug war. You know, war is the health of the state. We know, Randolph Bourne said that. War is the health of the state. And then another famous general, Smedley Butler, said that war is a racket. And lo and behold, it is. The military-industrial complex is very interested in what happens. But also, the war on drugs is a disaster, and we ought to repeal that war as well. The war on drugs and so much else that they do in Washington is based on the assumption that you don't know what is best for yourself, and therefore we have to have the nannies in Washington telling us what to do, because otherwise we wouldn't take care of us. They believe it in both ways. A certain group believes that you don't have good sense about how to spend your money, so they're going to tell you how to spend every penny. And the other portion will say, well, you don't know what to do about what you couldn't put into your lungs and into your stomach, and therefore you need the government to take care of you. But the war on drugs has led to a severe crisis in civil liberties. And this notion that we need the government to do this is really it's a recent thing. It isn't like Thomas Jefferson talked about it and ran on it in his platform. Oh, that's tax marijuana, you know. That didn't happen. That happened in 1937. And I just don't see how we can put up with it. Just think about it. It's an issue on the states' rights issue is one thing. Liberals generally will chide us for saying if you're for states' rights, you're a bad person. But, you know, I was on a liberal talk show the other day, and their main interest was on marijuana and my criticism of the war on drugs. He was from California. So they brought up this subject, and I pointed out to them, that is why you should pay attention to the 10th Amendment. You in California have a law that says you can use marijuana if you're sick, and it might be helpful to you. But what do? You endorse the system of the feds coming in and overruling your state laws. So if we use that correctly, whether you're left, right, or middle, libertarian or conservative, there's reason to believe that local government is always superior to the federal government telling us what to do. Yeah, I think one of the silliest outcomes on the war on drugs has been this idea that if you go out and decide to raise hemp and make some rope, you're a dangerous criminal. We're not, you know, we raised hemp in this country all the way through World War II. And matter of fact, though, they'll tell me, oh, but it's still legal to raise hemp. Yeah, it technically is. But you can't do it unless you get a federal license, but they won't give you the license. So the states make it legal, and you're allowed to raise hemp, but obviously they circumvent it, and they take it over. You know, when they prohibited the use of alcohol, there was a lot more respect for the Constitution. They amended the Constitution. As ill-advised as it was, they amended it. It didn't work, and it was a disaster. You know, it caused a lot of crime and things like that, and sort of like what's happening now. So, but now they don't even bother to think that you have to amend the Constitution for the federal government to take over these events. So it, to me, tells me that we live in an age where there's so little respect for the Constitution, makes it tougher for us. But just like the monetary issue is becoming more appropriate to talk about, all these other issues will become more appropriate too. We live in very dangerous time. I expect a lot of chaos and trials, but I also believe that the spirit of liberty still lives in this country. Enough people will wake up, and our voices will be heard.